We'll go through how students are feeling. So I'll talk about student sentiment and some of our research and insight from TSR Insight, but also polls we run across the student room. I'll pass you across to Oscar, who will give a bit of a recap of 2022. I'll probably cover off that actually. We'll pass to Oscar for the panel, and we'll have some amazing discussions, probably for about 30 minutes on just the experience of getting the best out of the student room. And then finally, we'll go back to Oscar for those key takeaways, best practice, and making the most of your official rep. And hopefully we'll have time at the end for questions. So please, please, please do pile them in. A combination of myself and Vicky from Team TSR will be keeping an eye on any questions. We're going to put them into the Q&A chat, and a combination of myself, Oscar, and the panelists will hopefully be able to answer those towards the end. Cool. So how are students feeling? Give a whistle-stop tour. So this is something that if any of you have attended any of the student sentiment reports that we do with the vast majority of universities on a monthly basis, this is probably a stat or a trend that you're acutely familiar with, and it's how students are feeling on the run-up to university, and particularly around the concept of making friends and belonging. So this is from February 2023, and we asked to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements. 69% said they worry about feeling lonely at university. If we go back to prior research, and in a second we'll talk a bit more about what we've seen recently, this is just an ongoing trend, and we know from lots of research from the likes of Wonky how important belonging is to essentially having sort of a successful time at university. Particularly if you work on the admissions and recruitment side of things, we spend a lot of time sort of getting people onto campus. What this shows is just how much we need to sort of basically stick the landing and ensure that the onboarding process is as smooth as it can be, and support students in that transition from school, A-levels, summer, and onto campus. The flip side of that, though, is a good proportion of people do feel confident that they will make friends at university, 54%. So the inverse of that is 46% of the people don't. Tell you a small story here. So I was speaking at a teachers conference at a university in the north, and if they're on the call, massive thank you for inviting me. And I was talking particularly about this point and how, generally speaking, we, and probably most of us on this call, we remember the before times of what it's like to go to a gig, go to a bar, go to a restaurant, and when things open up, we could kind of step back into that life and be like, oh yeah, I remember this. For the cohort that's going on to university now, that doesn't exist. And I was having this conversation, and there was a student at the back of the hall. There's many teachers, there's a student at the back, and just nodding away furiously. And I just asked, like, this seems to really resonate with you. Like, what is it? And like, well, I have anxiety anyway, which then made me feel instantly guilty for picking on them in a room full of people. I have anxiety anyway. But the thought of going to a completely new environment and having to meet completely new people and go into these really busy social situations, my anxiety just goes woo. And again, it's lacking that muscle memory of, like I said, the before times. And what we also see is that 58% of people believe that the university experience will be different from what it was sort of pre-COVID. I'd be interested to see how that changes over time, and particularly as this cohort actually make it onto campus. So that was in February. Then in May, we asked sort of a similar question. So this is for year 13s. Which part of starting uni makes you nervous? So doing well on my course, 80%, again, not too much of a surprise, but again, number one, 38% meeting people, making friends is the primary concern, and 18% earning and managing money. Again, cost of living, we'll talk about that in a second, but it is such a hot topic for all of us, but particularly for students and the potential impacts it could be having on their university choices. Which leads to, how is cost of living impacting university decision making? And again, this is from May 2023. So we asked our audience, thinking about your firm choice university, have you made any of the following decisions because of rising cost of living? You can see the stats here, but a couple of key ones. 29% are have chosen a course leading to a very specific career. The next one, 29%, again, very much linked into employability. So from a rep perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a commerce perspective, it's quite like this language is going to become more and more important. 28% choosing a uni close to home. Again, we see this is a trend coming out sort of time and time again, from a parental influence kind of going in two directions. Again, I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Higher starting salary, again, linking to employability, cheaper accommodation, and 18%, so a bit more long tail sort of placement year. So we're kind of just seeing a real shift being driven by cost of living to a heavy focus on outputs of the kind of almost a return of investment on higher education, but also this desire to stay close to home to save costs. So finally, again from May, we asked again what prospective students are concerned about. So which of the following statements do you agree with? And this is multiple choice. So number one, and this genuinely horrifies me that 50% of people have put this as a statement they agree with. I worry about the financial impact on my parents and carers if I go to university. And this is what I mean about, so there's parents as an influence and carers as an influence on university decision making is coming almost from two directions. So in one direction, it is a parent saying, look, stay close to home so we can sort of make the university experience cheaper. On the other side, there's a genuine concern from young people and students of the financial impacts of them going to university could have on their parents, which is a difficult thing for a 17, 18, 19-year-old to have on their shoulders amongst everything else. Again, 47% cost of living, while at university concerns more than tuition fees. As an official rep, as members of recruitment, admission, commerce departments at universities, we cannot fix the cost of living crisis, but we can try to mitigate some of its impacts through sort of just clever comms, hints, tips, how to budget, cheap eats, sort of that sort of thing. And the next one, don't expect to be eligible for any scholarships and bursaries, 46%. Again, this is something that comes up a lot in almost any research we do. Students are crying out for bursaries. Universities actually are crying out to fill bursaries, but they're going unfilled. And often it seems that bursaries come in at a very late stage in the offer making process, as opposed to being something that might be earlier doors in the consideration process. So again, yeah, just a great tip for rep, comms, for your CRM, about how you can bring that earlier into the conversation. Cool, so that is how students are feeling. Now it's a little look back to clearing and official reps last year. So a couple of stats before I pass you across to Oscar and our wonderful panel. So yeah, TSR numbers last year. So it's a big old site, as any of you who sort of navigate around it, supporting students will know more than most. So the clearing period last year, so from 1st of July to 31st of August, we saw 30.5 million sessions. Then what's super impressive, we saw 5.1 million views of posts that were created by official reps. And now they could be posts that sort of actually happened a couple of years back, as well as posts that happened during clearing, because your content is continuously supporting the audience, which again is why sort of Student Room is such a great platform, but the work that you do as official reps is so valuable, because you could help someone today, but also when you go off to do wherever you go off to do in a couple of years' time, that post could still help a student in 3, 5, sometimes up to 10 years' time. We had 5,000 posts made by our amazing official reps, and yeah, 180,000 posts across the site for our entire audience. So big site, very engaged, and yet you, the official reps, are a super, super important part of our community, and the support we're able to give. So again, yeah, a massive, massive thank you. Cool. So that's a bit of how students are feeling, a bit of TSR numbers, and Oscar, I'm going to pass across to yourself, the panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. That was actually really insightful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a sort of a quick Q&A with a few of our official reps here, And yeah, I guess I'll get started with some of the questions that we have. So we have a few different scenarios that I'm going to read questions on. The first one being, is clearing as stressful as they say? Carly, what would you say about this one?
I would say clearing can be a really difficult time for students. However, my best recommendation would be for them to go into clearing with an open mind and as much information as they can be, so they can be really fully prepared. So that could include recommendations like making notes of the university they could be interested in during clearing, making sure they've got details of their contact information, so they've got that already on the day, rather than 9 o'clock on results day coming along and having to search for all of these numbers when you already can be quite stressed in the first place. It can just eliminate that kind of worry of having to find things if you're already prepared. And I think going into it fully prepared will ensure that it can be a lot less of a stressful process and make sure that you get the most out of the clearing process.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really sort of important to make sure you give yourself enough time. You don't want to be waiting around as places sort of fill up. And, you know, whilst it can be a very stressful time, I do think actually it can also be a really exciting time too. You know, you could actually find the right university course that is right for you. So yeah, really good. Thanks for that, Carly. The next scenario is an anxiety scenario. So the question I have here is, I think I'm doomed. I think at best I'll get is DDD. Does that mean your life is basically over, like no unis would even give you a chance? Do you have any advice on how to deal with the build up to results? Amy, what would you say about this one?
So I think the important thing is to recognize that anxiety is totally natural coming up to results. You know, it's really, it happens to most of us. We all get worried about whether or not we're going to achieve the things that we were hoping to achieve and go to the places we were hoping to go. Now, you may well do completely much better than you expected. You know, you might come out, I've come out of exams before, I'm sure we all have, going, oh, I did so terrible at that, I'm never going to pass. And then you do much better than you think you're going to do. So although it is very difficult, try not to worry. Try and focus on the things that you can focus on before results day. Enjoy that time that you've got between finishing your exams, you know, and getting your results. Worst case scenario, you've got a lot of options available to you. There is clearing, and there may well be options that suit you in clearing. A lot of very good universities will go to clearing. You know, a lot of universities go to clearing. There may also be the option to talk to the university that you've applied to. They may be flexible on results day. You just don't know. So it's not the end of the world. There's also options for resits. You know, at 18, and I very much remember feeling like this, you feel like you've got to have everything set in stone, and that if you don't get it right now, that's it, life is over. As somebody who has changed careers several times, most recently in my mid-30s to do my PhD, I can confirm that, you know, there are lots of options and doors will open that you just totally didn't expect. So it might be that university ends up not being quite right for you this year, but maybe you can reset your A-levels, you might go and take a gap year, you might reconsider your options or your subjects. There's going to be people there who can support you, whether that's talking to other students on the student room, talking to official reps, talking to people in your college or your school, or within the universities that you're interested in going to.
Brilliant. Yeah, I definitely agree on this one. I actually think you'd be surprised amount of like number of options there are, and yeah, your life is definitely not over, especially at 18. I think a lot of the time you actually do a lot better than you expect, but I think it's also just important that you sort of just prepare for all scenarios, have all your options open, whether that's you know, you can still be eligible for your first or second choice. Obviously the build up to results can be stressful, but I think so long as you're prepared, you know, you actually might do better than you think. But yeah, great answer there. Thank you for that one. The third one is a moving away scenario. So the question I have is, I want to move out for university, but I'm scared it'll be too much for me as I'm quite shy. What is it like moving out? Who would like to answer this one?
Yeah, I don't mind, Oscar, that's fine.
Awesome.
What I would say is moving out can be quite a scary process. However, students have to remember they're not the only one in that position. Everybody moving to a university is in a new position, whether they're going to be commuting from home or moving into halls of residence. So you're not going to be the only person who is feeling this way, and it's completely normal to be scared, because it's a new experience. You're moving away from home possibly for the first time. What I would say is to remember is alongside your friends that you'll hopefully make in halls of residence, you also have support from the university, whether that be through the student union, or you're going to be having residential advisors that can support you in halls. There is that support available to you. So it's not going to be a case of they're throwing you in the deep end and you're just left. You're going to have that kind of support and comfort to help you get through the new transition and new process. And I think as well, you're going to kind of be considering if you should be moving out or if you should stay at home. Whereas you could figure out, if you want to stay at home, you could make that choice and maybe choose a university that's closer to home so you could commute. And then there's always the option to move out in year 2 or year 3, depending on what's going to suit you best. So there's plenty of options available depending on how you're feeling.
Brilliant. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can sort of look back at my time as a student. You know, moving out is obviously a very daunting time for students, but I think everyone's in the same boat. You know, you're not alone. I think a lot of other students will be feeling the same. And I think when you do sort of consider maybe going to halls, it's definitely worth looking at the socials and activities that your university can offer. And, you know, through those sort of things, you'll actually make a lot of friends, meet other students that have the same interests as you. And as well, you know, if you're not too sure still, you can look into maybe commuting to university if that is a possibility, of course. So yeah, brilliant answer there. Thank you for that one. The fourth scenario is a sort of perception scenario. So the question I have here is, I picked the university I want to go to and it looks good, but friends say it's got a bad reputation. Should I worry about the ranking or the area of the university? This is a good question. Who would like to answer this one?
So I can probably speak a little bit to that.
Awesome.
I mean, obviously, it's really important that you get a sense of what your friends think. I'm not discounting your friends' opinions whatsoever. However, ultimately, this is your university, and it's whether it's right for you. There are so many different pieces of information published about university rankings. You know, you can go to league tables. If you look at any of those sorts of information, inevitably it will be different. There are very few things where the same university appears in the same place in the same set of data. And I think ultimately it's whether or not a university is right for you. Do you feel comfortable there? It's why I really recommend trying to get to students try and get to open days if they can, even if that's not an in-person, try and get a virtual one, just to get a sense of the place. I know it isn't always possible, particularly for our international students. You know, they can't always come and look around universities, but if you can, try and get a feel of where to go. I actually picked both my universities, but I went to Aberystwyth as an undergraduate and Keele as a postgraduate, and I picked those primarily based upon feel of place, and whether or not I felt they were the sort of universities that would support me as a person. Yes, their academic results were a consideration, but at the same time, when I got to the campus, I was comfortable talking to staff and students. The students who I met and talked to, who showed me around, clearly loved both places. And I think that's the sort of thing that really gives you a sense of whether you're going to feel comfy somewhere. And yeah, it is about you. It's not about what your parents think, what your friends think, what your teachers think, what a newspaper or a website thinks. It's about what you think. So feel confident in asking questions when you go to visit places or when you email or attend events. You know, ask the questions that concern you and be comfortable and confident then in your choice. Also remember that if you get to a university and it isn't right for you, there are options, you know, that there might be options for going somewhere else, transferring over at the end of year 1 or semester 1 or something like that. So it's not the end of the world if you go somewhere and it ends up not being what you expected or quite right.
Yeah, agreed. I think actually, whilst it is obviously helpful to see what your friends and family think, I think the most important thing is what is right and best for you. You've got to consider a lot of factors, whether it's the university, the course they provide, and especially the location. I think, you know, if you evaluate all these sort of 3 aspects, it can make your decision a bit easier. But yeah, it's not about what your friends think. You know, I think sometimes going to an open day, like you said, is really helpful, or speaking to someone from the university or on the course can really give a good insight. And I think it's all about what you want, not what everyone else wants, not what the league tables say. You want what's best for you. So yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for your response there. I'm now going to move on to some sort of results day focused questions. So moving on to this sort of part of the Q&A. So the kind of questions I have is sort of like changing your mind. So this question I have here is, Is it too late to change course? I've been offered a place in civil engineering, which I'm most grateful for, but I was wondering if I could change to computer science. How would I do that? This is quite an interesting question. Who could answer this one?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Awesome.
So I would say in this scenario, it's going to depend on whether the student is looking to stay at their university if they've firmed their firm choice, or if they're looking to change university as well. So really they need to be contacting the university that they have their firm place with to see if it's possible for them to do that course with their firm choice. If not, then they can start expanding their options, doing some research through clearing, for example. If it's going to be a case of going through clearing plus, if they've got better results, or if they're just looking to change their course completely. So it is going to just be a case of speaking with the university first and then moving on to do their research. As they've firmed their choice, it's going to be best to do that first so they know what their options are with their firm choice before going ahead and doing anything else with any other university.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that can be quite an intimidating sort of decision for a lot of students. Some students might not feel it's even possible. Some would think, oh gosh, I've chosen this course, I've got to stick at it. That's not the case. You can obviously change your course, and if it is possible, obviously I think it's definitely worth reaching out to the university, maybe reaching out to the head of department to see if it's a possibility. Obviously, if you hit and meet the entry requirements, then of course you can definitely consider it. So don't feel pressured to sort of stick with it and sort of stay out of sort of sheer persistence. No, you can change. Just contact those, whether it's in the department, and see if you're eligible through UCAS. Then yeah, of course it's definitely a possibility. So great, thank you for that one there. Moving on to a missed grades scenario. So the question is, does anyone have advice on deciding whether to take a gap year and resit/apply, or reapply must I say, after missing your firm choice? Who would like to answer this one?
I can probably speak a little bit to that. I mean, I think it's a really difficult one. If you don't want to be pushed into taking another choice, you're really sold that you want to go to that place and do that course, and you don't want to enter clearing or look at other options, then a gap year might be the best option for you. And that can be for several reasons, partly because you may well move through to your firm next year. Although I would say that, it's always a good idea to have a couple of options just in case. So like we see it a lot with some of our most popular courses, medicine, for example. We often do get repeat applicants, but it is continually popular. It's not going to be a less popular course next year. But it can give you time to consider whether or not you want to resit. Or it could give you time to go and get like relevant experience that can really bolster your application. So your gap year could be doing many different things. People tend to think of a gap year as somebody went off traveling and spent it on a beach, but I actually don't know many students who do that. Most of the students that I know who've taken gap years have used it to gain some really good and valuable work experience, and to do things that bolster their applications for university. Now that could end up completely changing your mind about what you want to do at uni and open all sorts of new doors and opportunities for you. So I would definitely say, don't feel pressured into making a decision. Take your time. And if that means that you do have to take it a year, as we've already said, your life is not over if you do not go to university at 18. There are plenty of people these days who do wait a few years before going to university because they're not necessarily sure what they want to do at 18. And so you won't feel then that, you're not going to come to university and find out that you're too old for your course or anything like that. There'll be plenty of others who've done the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't rush into these things if you're not ready. As you said before, just because you're 18 doesn't mean you have to go to university straight away. I think if you're not willing to be rushed into a decision, or you can't find a course that you want to study, then take a year out, reevaluate your options. You may find a more suitable option next year. Obviously, every year, many students do this and actually opt to reset their exams and reapply for different universities of their choice, maybe picking a different course as well. I think it's definitely beneficial, as when you start to, do your course the following year, you might actually have a stronger knowledge of your subject area. And as you mentioned as well, in your gap year, you might actually get some relevant work experience, which could really help with your application. So yeah, 100%, don't think you have to go straight away. You've got enough time to make a decision. Great, moving on to the next example. So the sixth question is clearing not an option scenario. So what I mean by this is that someone's asked, I went from being usually always an A student in maths to getting a C. My clearing options have been limited so much. Carly, what would you say about this one?
Firstly, I know it's a daunting feeling when your results aren't what you expected, but that doesn't mean that their options are limited. There's going to be plenty of options out there for you. It's just finding those options and if they're going to be right for you. So firstly, I would recommend contacting your first and second choice universities to see what your options might be with those. You never know, they still might be able to take you onto the course depending on their entry requirements. It can vary from university to university, so it's definitely worth getting in touch with them to see what your options would be with them first. You never know, it might be difficult for them to take you onto that course, but they might be able to suggest something else, such as a foundation year or an alternative course, which would still allow you to continue on your desired course. If not, then the options are still going to be available through clearing. As Oscar previously said to one of the other questions, you might end up finding a better university that is a better suit for you going through the clearing process. Just because it's not what the results aren't what you expected doesn't mean that other universities aren't going to be able to look at your results and hopefully take you on for your desired course.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, you know, whilst it's definitely possible you may not get what you expect, you know, that doesn't mean that your first and second choices are gone. I think, you know, if you want to make sure the options are all still open, it's definitely best to reach out, contact university choices, make sure if it's still feasible. If not, they may propose that, yeah, as Carly said, you might have to do a foundation course or a different course entirely. But, you know, you shouldn't rule anything out. And I think your options are far from limited. You can still find many universities that are actually best for you, even if you don't get the grades you want. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great response there. Moving on to the next question. And this one is a clearing and time pressure scenario on how to choose. So the question is, I missed the grades for my firm, although I've been given an offer by my current insurance through clearing. League tables are pretty similar. Anybody have any opinions on which university is better overall for business, or how can I make the final decision as it all feels so rushed? Who would like to answer this question?
So I think with this one, it's another case of what we've said before. It is, clearing can feel quite time pressured because there are certain time pressures. And it is important not to feel rushed. You know, you might decide that the best option for you is to defer for a year or to wait another year, go on a gap year or something. But what you can do to try and make that choice, as you have got an offer from your insurance, is to maybe reach out to somebody at that university. Now that might be an official rep on the student room, or there'll probably be a university forum. Most universities have got forums on the student room. You could pop a question in there. You could put in something along the lines of, you know, has anyone here studied this course? What did you think of it? You know, what's the university like? What's the campus like? I mean, when I was looking at universities myself, I actually went and visited my, I think, top 3 choices, which I was lucky enough to be able to do, but it did mean I'd actually got a bit of a sense of all 3 of my firm and my insurance choices, which was helpful when it came to kind of results day. But you can also reach out to staff. You know, there'll be staff. A lot of universities have staff and staff or student support advisors on clearing hotlines, who will be more than happy to answer your questions, and may be able to put you in touch with colleagues or current students who can give you an overview. So it's always worth asking that question and getting a little bit of an idea of the place before you sort of firm up your choice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as I've said previously, you know, you should never rush into these sort of things, and you want to take the time to evaluate all the aspects of the university, whether it's the course and location. And, you know, sometimes whilst you don't get your firm number 1 choice, your insurance actually might be better in terms of the location, or it can offer good employability opportunities after you graduate. So don't think, you know, it's a second choice because it's not as good as the first one. You just want to make sure you have all options open. And yeah, like you said, Amy, you want to reach out to maybe someone on the course from the university to get more of an insight. And as I said earlier, if you don't want to rush into your decision, you can defer. That's absolutely fine. Great. So moving on to the 8th question. And this is a finance related question. Someone's asked, I'm going through clearing this year. How does that affect my student finance and what do I do? Carly, what would you say on this one?
I think it's important to firstly say, don't worry. If you're going through clearing, you're still able to apply and get your student finance. That's really important. You don't need to stress that it's going to be gone and you're not going to have it for September. If you've already applied for student finance, that will make the process a lot simpler. If you're changing university or course, then all you need to do is let student finance know. You can either do that simply by logging in to your online account and just changing your details, or you can give them a call. What I would suggest is doing it online. Their lines will be very busy during results day, so it'll be much quicker for you if you just log online and get those details updated. And I do that once your place is confirmed. Don't do anything until you've had that place confirmed with the university, just in case that the place doesn't get confirmed, you end up going somewhere else. It'll just make the process a lot quicker. And if you've not applied for student finance and you're applying for the first time through clearing, it's really important that you apply for your student finance as soon as possible to ensure that they can get that processed and ready for you and when you start your course. So I would, soon as that's confirmed, apply for student finance as soon as possible.
Yeah, brilliant response there. I think student finance could be a bit of an intimidating thing for a student before they go to university. But I think, if you are maybe changing university, then all you need to do is obviously, of course, let student finance know. Obviously, once your new course has been sorted and confirmed, then you should log into your student finance portal, change your application to match the new university and the course you'll be attending. But don't panic about this sort of situation. A lot of students go through it. So don't think you're the only one that's going through these sort of scenarios. Awesome. On to the 9th question. And this scenario is about, when is the right time to decide? So the question I have here is, I really want to go to my chosen university and I'm one grade off. Usually a grade lower gets accepted, but I rang the uni and they aren't accepting me. Would there be a possibility of being accepted tomorrow morning when there are leftover places and less students in clearing? Carly, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so firstly, every day in clearing is going to be different, and it'll be different for every university. So with entry requirements, they can vary from year to year, and sometimes universities are unable to accept students who don't meet the conditions of their offer. However, although you might have been told that you're not going to be accepted, as I mentioned, clearing can vary. So it would be worth speaking with your chosen university tomorrow morning when the day comes, as they might be able to offer you something different, such as a foundation year that would allow you to still go on and complete that course. I would suggest, alongside contacting your chosen university, you also start looking at some other alternative choices that you might be interested in through clearing. Just said, every university is going to have different requirements, so it's better to keep your options open and have as much information as you possibly can whilst exploring your different options.
Yeah, brilliant. I think this is a really good question. And, being one grade off is definitely not as bad as you think. Yes, you might have been told that it doesn't accept you in that moment, but every day in clearing is different and you shouldn't assume that tomorrow will be exactly the same. Of course, reach out and still see if that's the case, but I'd also suggest in the meantime that you contact and gather information on maybe alternative choices. You'll even be surprised on the universities that will still accept you despite being one grade off. So even if you find yourself, you could even find yourself a better choice. And I think it's always best to keep your options open. As I've said before, every day in clearing is different. Thank you so much for your responses there, guys. I really appreciate that. It was really insightful. That is the end of the Q&A. I hope you all found that really interesting. I definitely did. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on to the presentation. Paul, could you do the next slide, please? You are on mute, Paul.
Of course I am. Can you see the screen?
I can see the screen.
Amazing. Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So in this part of the presentation, I'm going to focus on how you can make the most out of your official rep. Next slide, please, Paul. So the first place to go when using your official rep account is obviously your forum. So with your form, you'll be able to update and monitor your sticky threads. For those of you who don't know what sticky threads are, essentially, you'll be able to pin a thread at the very top of your forum, which makes it much easier for students to access. And you'll be answering any sort of questions that are posted in on your forum. Some example threads I'd suggest are things like an FAQ, ask a current student, accommodation options, wellbeing tips, and revision tips too. And when students are posting on your forum, I'd always recommend that you congratulate when they said they've applied or even got an offer. And why I suggest that is to help build and maintain your community. You really want to try and create a positive perception of your university and just encourage discussion. But whilst obviously you're responding to people that are applying to university this year, you also want to focus those that are actually applying for next year as well. Next slide, please, Paul. So what I have now is a couple of examples of how to best post and in on your forum. This actually is one from the University of Brighton, and this is the Clearing 2022 thread. So what they've done is they've set up a thread in their forum, they've made it sticky during clearing. And I think what's really good about this one is that it's very informative. If you have a read, they provide all the relevant contact information, whether that's a phone number, email address, and they've made it very clear that they're happy to answer any sort of questions and obviously about the process online too. So I would always suggest having a clearing thread set up in your forum. At the end of this presentation, we can obviously help set you guys up with that if you need any help. And yeah, we'll obviously add that to the clearing mega thread where students can easily access these. Next slide, please, Paul. The next example is just providing useful information. Obviously, clearing can be quite intimidating in getting the right information. You just want to make sure you're getting everything correctly. And I think what Lancaster have done really well with this one here, essentially a student has asked, can you pick 5 choices? Is that enough? And I think what they've done really well in this response is actually they provided the information through a list of bullet points. Apologies if you can hear some building works next to me. And what they've done with the bullet points, it makes it very digestible and easy for students to read. They've given the advice, which is very useful, not just for the user, but also for everyone on site. So you can actually see how they formatted it here. They've quoted it. For those of you who don't know what quoting is, essentially is that it will put the user's question within your response. And this is really useful, especially if you get questions which might be quite generic or might apply to a lot of students. It just saves you the time of having to answer similar questions over and over. But then also for a lot of students on site, they can see that their potential question has been asked too. So really good. And you can also see they've actually kept a friendly tone throughout. This is one of the most important things using your official rep account. You really want that tone of voice to be friendly, helpful, and empathetic at the same time. Next slide, please, Paul. Brilliant. And then the final example I have here is helping students make a balanced decision. In this example, what I have here is essentially a student who lives in London, whether they should choose to go into accommodation or should they commute if they're living in London anyway. And I think what's really good about this example here from the University of Durham is, they haven't attempted to sway or influence or change the user's mind. They've remained neutral, and I think they've given a lot of pros and cons. They haven't said to them, oh, don't go to London, come to Durham instead. They've remained very sort of, balanced on this sort of question. And I think that's really important. You don't want to come across like you're trying to influence a student or user. And they've actually asked follow-up questions, which I think genuinely shows they care about their question. So of course, always ask follow-up questions, ask them things like, have you come to an open day, things like that. It just shows that you genuinely care about giving the best response possible. And you can also see they've actually provided anecdotes, which just humanizes the response. It'll make the user feel much more at ease and it'll feel much more relatable as well. On to the next slide, please. So now what I'm going to cover is some best practice over for clearing. And some of the most important things I would suggest is, of course, the tone of voice, as I've mentioned earlier. You want it to be both friendly, helpful, and empathetic at the same time. You really want to try and encourage discussion as well. So asking follow-up questions, ask if they need anything else. It just genuinely shows you care. This is one of the most important things for me, is actually just remember they're human. Provide individual responses, share personal experiences. So if you are a student, maybe talk about your time in the course, sign off posts with your name. If maybe you're not too sure on how to best respond, maybe reach out to someone that can give a good response. So if someone's asked about the geography course and you study history, no, don't worry about it. Maybe reach out to someone that's on that course, or maybe even a tutor. It's all about giving the best response you can. The next point is avoid direct marketing speech. So what I mean by this is just don't copy and paste or try and advertise. I don't think I need to speak too much about this one. I think it's pretty clear that if you are to do sort of these things, it doesn't help your reputation on site. And then the last one is keep the conversation on site. So what I mean by this is no linking to any other forms of social media like Facebook, for instance. You really want to try and keep the conversation on the student room so everyone else can join in. The next slide, please, Paul. And some quick extra hints and tips. One of the most important things is you can click watch, that little blue button there, and you'll get up-to-date notifications on when something is posted in your forum. Just means you don't miss anything. You can also edit your posts. So if your responses may be out of date or you needed to change something, you can easily amend your response by clicking that edit button. Obviously clearing, a lot of things can change. And so if you did want to change your response, just hit that edit button, really, really easy. If you ever come across a user maybe sharing misinformation, advertising, anything like that, then it might be worth hitting the report button, that little button there. If you just click on it, select a reason, maybe add a little bit of context, and then one of our moderation team will be able to look at that as soon as they can. Private messaging. So what I mean by this, if there's an instance where someone's posting on a thread and it's not maybe relevant to the discussion, or maybe they're sharing personal information, I would always suggest asking them if they're happy to be private messaged. And if they are happy to be private messaged, then obviously, give them a direct message and help them with their inquiry there. And then the last one, as I sort of mentioned earlier, the clearing mega thread. Obviously add your clearing thread to the mega thread, and it'll make it much easier for students to access. Next slide, please, Paul. So in terms of getting involved in conversations across the site, some good forums I would suggest. Next slide, please.
Oscar, just a heads up, we've got 10 minutes and we've got quite a few really good questions in the chat.
Okay.
So can you make it the last couple of slides?
Of course, absolutely. Whiz through. So those not slides even, those threads you can find at the end, all really useful, especially leading up to that important time of year. Next slide, please. I'll quickly whiz through this. Obviously, I spoke about what to do in terms of what not to do. As I said before, don't advertise, don't ignore the struggle of students. It's a very stressful time for them. You really want to try and be as empathetic as possible. Don't post communications that read like ads. Students are very tech savvy. They're going to read through some straight away if it reads out like an ad. Don't post through a thread in a random forum with no context. It just looks disingenuous. And don't start a thread about a topic and then just go on to proceed to promote your university. I have some bad examples, but I'll just maybe point one or two out. So basically one example is if a student has asked, I'm currently undecided between this university and this university. If you respond saying, I may be a bit biased, I can't deny this university is absolutely great. It doesn't directly answer the question. You can clearly see that they're actually trying to influence and market their university. You want to be as neutral as you can. If you want to find more of these examples, you can find them at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please, Paul. I'll whiz through this as well. A response checklist, some of this I've already repeated. You really want to make sure your tone of voice is friendly. You want to be as empathetic as possible. It's obviously a very stressful time for students. You want to check and understand that you've directly answered the question. So maybe ask them a question in return to show that you understand. Obviously signing the post up with your name, I would always suggest. And read the post back to yourself. Don't obviously include unnecessary relevant links, and don't copy and paste the same response to multiple users either. Next slide, please. In terms of how you can support your official reps, obviously you can reach out to us, but a few other places I'd suggest is the official rep lounge or posting in your own official rep feedback thread. Otherwise, reach out to these official reps, Snow Princess and Evil Homer. They can help you with any sort of your inquiries. Otherwise, email a member of your customer success team. They'll be able to help you out with your inquiry. And then in terms of best practice or any sort of helpful, useful tips, you can access one of our resource pages. You can find some really good videos. And if you ever needed rep training or any sort of bespoke advice, then you can obviously reach out to us as well, and we can give you that as well. And then monitoring engagement, you should be able to speak to your account manager and get an up-to-date UPP report too. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways before I wrap things up. Yes, create a Clearing 2023 thread. Can't recommend this enough. It just means that students will be there to ask any sort of questions, and you can really encourage that discussion during clearing. And make sure you have an active presence on site. Congratulate every student that has an offer or has applied for your university, and answer every question you can. Help students make a balanced decision and support them in their choices too. And the quality of response can really impact a lot of students and users. Read the post back to yourself, go through the response checklist if you need. And if anything else, just contact us for any sort of additional advice or support. Next slide, please. Any questions, comments, or feedback? So I can see that we have a few here. So I guess I'll run through them now. Any tips on finding questions to answer? When I get round to looking, I've already answered the new questions. So a good way on finding questions to answer is you can sign up to a thing called keyword rep alerts. For those that don't know what that is, keyword rep alerts essentially is you'll get notifications on specific words or phrases that are mentioned on site. So it doesn't mean your university or your username has been directly mentioned, but the specific words and phrases that you have chosen, you'll get notifications on. It just means you'll find the conversations that you might be missing. So if you'd like us to set that up for you, then of course we can do that, no problem at all. Question for the end. What is the best way to engage students as reps? We struggle with engaging students, ambassadors that we pay with the official reps. Perhaps Carly or Amy could give some first-hand experience in relation to this. Do either of you guys have advice on how to best engage students as reps?
I feel like I can answer that. We recently have just taken on a student rep, and she's been with us about 6 months. And to be honest, it can be firstly a difficult thing to navigate and get that engagement. But what I found worked for us was to have regular meetings with these student ambassadors and spending time with them on site. So you're not just kind of leaving them off to do their own thing, having that kind of time where you can sit with them, even if it's for half an hour, to go through site and show them what they can be doing, what they can engage in. And I think that is probably one of the best tips I can get to cross. Really, that made a difference to us, and they started to see how we would respond to things and how they can respond to things and the differences, and also talking to them about if they have any ideas, just so they can get engaged and they can start their own kind of posts and forums, obviously with it being university approved, but things like student Q&As or a big thing at the moment is cost of living. Can they share any tips they have with cost of living? Because that's going to be things that they're experiencing, rather than kind of answering entry requirements questions and admissions questions that are going to be more official, rep based. I think kind of giving them the control of having that kind of almost power to do what they feel like is going to connect with students allows them to be more engaged with the platform.
100%, yeah, agree with all you said. And as well, if you'd like, we can actually send over a sort of, I've created a document with some thread suggestions. That'll be a really good way to sort of get more discussions on your forum. So hopefully that answers that all okay. Moving to the next question. When answering questions, I can normally only signpost people to the university website or an email contact. I feel like I should do more, but often can't offer any more. That's a good question. And I think hopefully after this webinar, you might get a bit more help on what to do. So asking follow-up questions, for instance, you know, like I said, it's a discussion-based website. And so actually, if you ask a few follow-up questions, it can just generate a discussion, and actually other students can get involved too. So don't feel like, you know, you can only offer so much. If you really try and want to understand what they're asking, feel free to ask them more questions. And then hopefully that will be enough. But if you still think you need more, maybe the thread suggestions that I suggested, that could be really good as well. Yeah, so hopefully that answers it all okay. Let me know if you wanted some more on that. Another question I have is, what would you suggest if your threads in your forum have no engagement at all, but you've been engaging with other areas of the platform? I think that's a good question. If you are maybe posting and you're not getting the responses you like, don't worry about it. It does take a bit of time. Don't expect that you're going to get, you know, questions or something posted straight away. This does take a bit of time, and some of the time you need to actually enhance your reputation. So as I mentioned earlier, is posting on other forums which is relevant to you. Obviously with the keyword rep alerts, that means you can find other discussions. And once maybe you enhance your reputation, you will then maybe see a bit more engagement on your platform. Other than that, if you still feel like you're not, then obviously reach out to us. We can actually give you some bespoke advice as well, if you think it's necessary. So yeah, hopefully that answers it all okay. The last question I have here in front of me, is there a specific time you would recommend posting new threads, content, or does it really matter? I wouldn't say it does, but obviously I wouldn't suggest posting loads of different threads at once. You want to, you know, maybe a bit sort of structured with it, and that's a conversation that you might want to have internally. But I would suggest maybe posting something once a week or maybe once a day, totally up to you and your resources, of course. But yeah, I wouldn't just post everything all at once. I'd maybe have a bit of structure to it, because otherwise you're not going to have anything else to say. But yeah, that's a great question. And please let me know. Yeah, go on.
To add to that, Oscar. So 2 of our busiest days are Tuesdays and Thursdays. And one of the things I'll often say to universities where the official reps might be quite time poor, or those reps are actually sort of members of the marketing team as opposed to student ambassadors, where it can be one thing amongst many, is that if you're able to take an hour on a Tuesday and an hour on a Thursday, you're going to end up doing a really, really great job. Generally speaking, traffic does decline on a Friday and into the weekend, and then sort of come back up in the week and peak on Thursdays. So I would say they are probably the optimum times to post.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really insightful, actually. And then the last question I have here is, when answering a thread about choosing 2 universities, I posted the info from both unis from the Guardian League tables. I didn't say which one was better. I just presented the information. Was this wrong? No, absolutely not. You've answered the question and you haven't sort of been biased. You haven't said which university is better. You've given some factual information. So I wouldn't worry about that. Don't feel like you're maybe spreading misinformation. It would be more of a case if you're potentially being biased or you're trying to influence the user. It sounds like you've answered the question correctly. And if they actually proceed to ask another question, then you've done what you needed to do there. So don't worry about that.
Just to jump in there as well, Oscar, I think, Amy, you gave a really great response earlier around league tables. And I think to whoever asked this question, I think the only thing that you could possibly have added to that is a bit of that reassurance of it's not all about league tables. This is somewhere you're going to be for three to 4 years. And so many factors come into play beyond league tables. So if I could have added to that question, I think you've done a really good response by just sort of posting the facts, is expand on that around, so this should just be one facet of your decision-making process, alongside going to virtual open days, physical open days, chatting to the wider community, your parents, teachers, etc.
Definitely, yeah. I have a couple more questions here on the chat box. I will go to the last question on the Q&A afterwards. So this question is, there are some interesting questions to answer, particularly in the relationship section. As an official rep, should I look to answer these or steer away from them? Would appreciate some past rep advice on this. So I think, talking from my experience, I would only discuss or answer in the relationships part of the forum if it's relevant to a university or relevant to any sort of education. I'm not going to suggest that you give dating advice to loads of different people in the relationship forum. But if there's maybe a question saying, oh, I'm scared of moving away to university because I'll be away from my partner, then yeah, of course, absolutely answer, because that's applicable and relatable to university. So yeah, if it's relevant, of course, but don't go around the relationship forum offering dating advice is what I'd suggest. Carly, Amy, anything else to add on that one?
Yeah, I'm just laughing because my student rep likes to get involved quite a lot with things. She thinks she's being really helpful, but I'd say exactly what Oscar said. If it's related to the university, 100%. If it's university life, but again, you don't want to be giving dating advice. I would say with relationship, it can be quite tricky, because if that word relationships comes up, they could just be referring to a friendship and struggling to form relationships at university. So it's just reading the question kind of, I think with the relationship section, you can decipher what kind of context it's in by the other responses that they've already had a reply. It does seem to be quite a busy forum. So I've just recommended sticking with, unless it mentions university or education, just to stay away from it otherwise.
No, definitely. Yeah, great response there. Really interesting question, actually, really appreciate that one. I have 2 more questions. So one I have here is, how do you see your ranking as a university on the platform? And does this have a huge impact on student engagement? This might not be relevant for me. Carly, Amy, would you have anything to say in terms of ranking of a university? Does that affect you guys at all?
I mean, I think from our perspective, obviously, we're really proud of the work that we do with and that students do on the student room and on other forums. It's a very important part of the recruitment process and of getting Keele's name out there. You know, Keele is we're not based in a major city. The first question, I mean, we actually have a part on our website called "Where is Keele?" because a lot of people don't know where we are, and so it's a good way of getting a sense of what makes our university, and having a way of getting students engaged with other students. So yeah, we are. I mean, you know, platforms like the Student Room are very important to us. I mean, actually, talking back to the earlier question about engaging your student reps, I think that's something, you know, make them feel valued, make them realise that this work's really important and that it really means something to you as a university, and that they're making a genuine difference to your university and to recruitment. So yeah, I do think, you know, when we've done really well, that's gone into like our comms, it's gone out to other students, to sort of say, yeah, we're doing really well on this, and this is something we want to take forwards and improve on, and what can we learn from the work we're doing on the Student Room that we can put into other elements of our approach to our students and to recruitment. So yeah, it is important, I think.
Yeah, that's really, actually, yeah, I'm glad to know that now. Number, email address, website link. If you do respond with any sort of clearing information, I think one important thing is just make sure it's always up to date. And if not, then as I mentioned earlier, it's maybe worth editing your response to make sure it's up to date and still useful and relevant for students. And then in terms of the tone of voice, I think I've said before, yeah, you know, keep it friendly, helpful, and empathetic. And yeah, I can assure you would really get the best out of your official rep account. Is that it for questions? I don't think we have any more.
I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, just again, a massive thank you to Amy, Carly, yeah, for being part of our panel and sharing your amazing expert advice. It's super appreciated. But also, yeah, for everyone who's again been on this call. I think most of you who are on this webinar probably are official reps. And as that, you are part of our community, you're part of the Student Room community, and part of what makes the site as useful for millions of students as it is. So again, actually just a massive thank you to you and for the work that you do in making TSR what it is, and for taking the time to invest in, you know, this hour in being able to be a better official rep and better support the community. So yeah, thank you all. And if you do have any more questions, please do feel free to email them across to myself and Oscar. If you're not involved in the monthly University Partner Pack meetings yet, please do reach out to your account manager to get involved. They're a great way to, one, to talk about some of the stats of what we see on the Student Room, but mainly to talk through student sentiment and the heart of kind of like what students are feeling and what we see in the Student Room. And that is just super useful for being a better rep, but also thinking about university comm strategy, CRM, social approach to social. It can feed into so many different angles. Yes, thank you all and have a wonderful rest of the day. Awkward Zoom wave.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.